Good morning, everyone. My name is Vido Shabangu, and today I am honored to be your host for this amazing webinar on wellness and self-care.
As we all understand, this is a very difficult situation for a lot of our customers, and specifically for our SME customers, where they've been bombarded with a lot of issues. And therefore, the loan relief programs stretching from 3 to 12 months has been really helpful in helping them reorganize themselves. Now, turning to today's topic, because it is really a critical one. It is called wellness and self-care. You cannot give what you don't have, and you cannot give if you're not well and you're whole in yourself. And therefore, we felt it was a really important topic to discuss as Absa to ensure that customers and people in general are taking care of themselves. And this is just a beginning of a conversation that I'm sure will continue in due course. And therefore, we need to understand what are the true effects of COVID, not just to our businesses, to ourselves who are going to give input into our business. So today's topic, therefore, is timely, and especially coming a few days after the task force formed by the Ministry of Health recommended that mental health should be declared a national emergency of epidemic proportions, and that the government should prioritize mental health in the public health and socio-economic agenda.
Thank you, Elizabeth. You really have done an amazing job in setting our minds on what it is that we can expect from today's webinar. It's great to have a bank that's not only concerned about our money, but also about our just holistic well-being. I'd just like us to take note of some housekeeping rules that we are all to adhere to. Shortly, you will see a pop-up slide that will just have all the rules that we'll just go through before we get into our discussion. And the first rule is that participants will be muted throughout. Here we go. Participants will be muted with their videos throughout the session. Secondly, today's webinar is being recorded. We will be able to share a link with you after the event is complete. We do welcome you to revisit the content yourself and share it with colleagues. The third being, we also invite your comments and questions. Please refer to the questions tab on your screens. If you think of a question for the speakers at any point of our discussion, you can just type it there. And then a question and answer session will be held towards the end of our conversation. I will make sure that I announce that shortly before it does begin. So thank you for that. And I'd just like to give a brief explanation of why it is that we are here. We know that the pandemic has come with a lot of unprecedented challenges that have really reminded us of the importance of us prioritizing our own well-being, because it is not only beneficial to ourselves, but to everyone else who is around us. So we know that the added stress of the challenges that have come from the pandemic, the changes that we have seen, has made it very easy for us to slip into habits that may feel good in the moment, but can really be detrimental to our own health in the long term. So as such, we are having this conversation, and I'm so excited to be joined by an amazing panel of experts who really are exceptional in their field and will really serve to give us some great insights on what it is that we should be doing to take better care of ourselves. And so with that, I'm just going to give each panelist a few seconds to briefly just introduce themselves and explain to us what it is that they do, so we can understand the perspective that they'll be coming from. And I'd like to start off the introductions with Dr. Amadi.
Thank you so much, Mpilo. My name is Dr. Emmanuel Amadi. I'm a medical doctor, a public health specialist, and a psychiatric resident. I will be speaking today about mental health and wellness. So keep it tuned. I'm happy to be here.
Yes, and we're happy to have you. And with that, we'll be followed by Buitumelo.
Hi, everybody. My name is Buitumelo Buikuto. I am a registered trauma counselor by profession, mental health practitioner as well. And today I'll be speaking on self-care, and we'll be unpacking that a little bit. And thank you so much for having me.
Yes, no, we are honored to be the ones having you today. And that Buitumelo will be followed by Amy. Amy, could you please introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Amy Galland, and I'm a yoga teacher, an energy medicine practitioner, and a sustainability consultant. And today I'll be talking about nutrition, exercise, and meditation. So thank you for having me. It's nice to be here.
Yes, thank you for that. And our last panelist is Caroline.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Philo, for that. My name is Caroline Dongo. I'm the Marketing and Corporate Relations Director for Absa Bank Kenya, but I will soon be speaking about some of my other new roles that I've acquired in this season, some of which include a headmistress for a high school and a co-worker, a landlord for a co-working space that I'm sharing with certain people in my household. So glad to be here and looking forward to this conversation.
Yes, no, definitely. And so without further ado, we're going to jump straight into the first discussion that we're going to be having, and it's going to be held by Dr. Madi. So yes, Dr. Madi, please just start us off with what it is that you have to share with us today.
Well, thank you so much, Mpilo. We'll be kicking off this discussion on mental health and mental wellness. Could I have the first slide, please? That is the last slide. Thank you. Well, we're going to discuss on mental health and mental wellness, and a brief definition of the terms will come in handy. Well, mental health is basically defined as a state of well-being, in which every individual is able to realize their potential and cope with the stresses, normal stresses that we normally have in our lives, but be fruitful and contribute positively to our community. Whereas mental wellness is where it's an active process where we are aware and make choices of our daily living and lifestyle to be able to be successful in our existence. So in a nutshell, is that health is a state of being, whereas wellness is a state of living a healthy lifestyle. So to get it right is that wellness is a matter of choice. The things that you do on a daily basis, the things that you engage in on a daily basis will definitely affect your health. So in a nutshell is wellness is a matter of choice, and therefore health depends on your wellness. In this, moving on to the next slide, in this times where mental health and wellness is very important and very core because of the pandemic that we are in, understand that we have risks in developing mental illnesses, because as I had suggested earlier, I mentioned that mental health is a state of being, but wellness is where the choices that you make on a daily basis. So the effect of this pandemic has been immense, largely because of the various activities that have been hampered because of the COVID-19 pandemic, and also the restrictions that we have in our society, as it were, because of if one has been affected or infected by it, you're either being quarantined or isolated, and this has various effects on our mental well-being and mental health. There are also other activities, the routines that we have, our work has largely been affected, our livelihood. People have lost jobs, other employees have had pay cuts, revenue for business people has reduced because the business environment has been affected by it, because we're not having so many people going outside. We're having lockdowns for that matter. So many businesses have been affected. Service industry has been affected. Even hospitals themselves. Many would think that hospitals are having a booming business right now, but it might not be the case for all of them, because people are afraid even to go to clinics. So their revenue has also been affected. So business, as it were, is not normal anymore. The new norm has disrupted the norm that, as it were, as we knew it. So things to do with loan repayments, we have had that in the clip before, where Absa has gone, taken a step and even giving people breaks, a holiday in loan repayments because of the economic slump that we have in the business environment has been largely affected by the COVID-19. So this has led to levels of loneliness, even the risk of developing mental illnesses such as depression, anxiety, even leading to other mental conditions like drug-induced psychosis because of the unhealthy way of coping with these stresses. where you have economic losses and such, and being in isolation and quarantine for a long time will affect your mental health. And as such, you would also realize that things to do with self-harm and suicidal behavior are expected to rise, and are actually on the rise. So the other thing is that we also recognize that the stigma associated with COVID-19 has large implications on people in our mental health and in our mental wellness, because people in the society, or the society as it were, are shunning those who have been infected by the virus, knowing that how the virus is being spread, but we still see the people that have been infected by the disease, and this has, even after recovery, and this has a large impact in our mental health and wellness. So the risk of developing mental illnesses is quite high caused by the effects of this pandemic in the populace, and largely even as it protracts for a long period. Remember, for us, all this began somewhere in March. Realize other countries like China, who have had this for longer, even though they have contained it for now. Countries like the USA still having to grapple with the pandemic, as it were. I mean, the longer it takes, the effect of it in our mental health and in our mental illness is so high. So as it protracts, we know that it's going to make a large impact on our mental health and wellness. We can move on to the next slide. We understand that, so in this regard, cases of mental illnesses, such as depression, we talked about anxiety, we talked about drug-induced psychosis, other mental illnesses such as addictions will be amplified with the persistence of this COVID-19 pandemic protracting for a longer period. And we've talked about the end spectrum of suicide also being a risk as well. The other aspect that probably I may not want to forget about is the domestic violence. Remember, during this period of the pandemic, we have largely been at home, being quarantined, being isolated, being in lockdown. So a large number of us even working from home. So we need to have our homes to be a safe space to work, a safe space to live in, but realize that the stress and the pressure that we have because of economic losses, some have had pay cuts and lost jobs, and with unhealthy coping mechanisms, has led to domestic violence, making home, which was supposedly to be a safe space, not being too safe for us. And in Kenya right now, the Minister of Public Service, Youth and Gender Affairs has reported about 42% increase in the number of domestic cases in our country. You can see how this impact, how the COVID-19 has impacted on the domestic violence, and this is not quite good, because it will probably perpetuate the risk of other vices as well, because when young children are also exposed to such domestic violences, they don't turn out to be too well, because they end up to cope with the violence that they see, and this and all that kind of vices that will happen in our society. So the ripple effect will be quite immense. We are yet to see much of it right now, but later on, as we progress, we might see a lot of the ripple effects thereof that will occur. Indeed, the need for a more holistic approach in tackling this pandemic in our society is evident, and we shouldn't just be looking at the infectious aspect of it, although it's important, but it shouldn't be the only focus for us. We should be looking at the mental health, because mental health and wellness is a core aspect, and it should not be left to chance, because then we may not have the opportunity that this pandemic as well has accorded us to deal with the mental health and wellness issues. So I like it that we are talking about mental health and mental wellness, because we are not leaving it to chance, because if we leave it to chance, then we may not have that opportunity to deal with this. Just a snippet on the numbers on how this mental health, we can move to the next slide and just look at a snippet of how this thing is affecting us. Next slide, please. We can see that. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah, we can see with the numbers here that we have an estimated about 260 million people worldwide suffering from depression. This was before the pandemic, and as I alluded to, I suggested that these numbers, we might see an increase of this because of the pandemic, largely because of the effects that we are seeing. And 1.9 million Kenyans were also suffering from depression. This is just the numbers before the pandemic, and we are yet to see an increase of this. So it's important that we give the due attention to mental health and wellness, because it's very important. About 877,000 people worldwide commit suicide annually. You see, that's a huge number, about 1,408 suicide deaths per year in Kenya. And a recent survey still indicates that 20% of people go to work experience suicidal thoughts. And the thing is this, in society, because we still have the stigma of mental health and mental wellness, especially the stigma on mental illnesses, is that a large number of people, even workers, will still go to work when they have the suicidal thoughts and not want to talk about it, believing that once they talk about the suicidal thoughts or ideation, that they will be deemed different, and that it might be seen that they will actually go ahead. Remember that talking about the suicidal ideation will not necessarily lead you to actually doing it. As we say, a problem shared is a problem half solved. So talking about it as well will also enable the people around you to look after you, in the sense that you do not tip over to where you actually go ahead and do the acts, because we know about it's 4 times the number of women actually have the suicidal ideation, but do not actually do it. But it's 4 times more for men to actually complete the action. So you can see the disparity there. Men actually are more prone to completing the suicide vis-a-vis women, and that largely can be something to do with them sharing their problems, talking about it, having groups where they talk about their issues, but men largely just can it up and blow up much later. So it's important that mental health and mental wellness should be destigmatized, so to speak, such that we are able to help one another. And you can see that the global effect of lost productivity is up to 1 trillion per year. Based just on depression and anxiety alone. This is just a small spectrum of mental illnesses that we have, but the others like schizophrenia, things to do with drug addictions, but just on depression and anxiety alone, and which is largely a high risk because of the pandemic that we're having at the moment. 1 trillion per year is lost in productivity is a huge amount. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So we're going to look at on coping strategies. So coping refers to cognitive and behavioral strategies that people use to deal with stressful situation or difficult demands, whether they are internal or external. By internal, we mean the emotional beat, external meaning that the things that are actually happening around you. Sometimes we need to cope with things that happen to us, and other times we must cope with things that happen within us. So there's that stress within and stress without that we need to cope. So these coping skills or mechanisms are not the same as defense mechanisms. The defense mechanisms are generally unconscious processes that people are unaware when they're using, such as projection. That is one of the defense mechanisms that probably we could have. It's a negative defense mechanism, where an example would be you've been lashed at the office, but because you do not have the power to lash back at your boss, then you lash out at your spouse or your children at home. So that's a projection kind of defense mechanism. So they're not the same. Yeah. Coping and defense mechanism, that is basically the difference, because coping mechanisms are the skills or the strategies that you use to deal with the stressful situations. Next slide, please. So we're going to look at the positive skills, coping skills, and vis-a-vis the negative coping skills. An aspect of positive coping skill is journaling, just writing down your feelings. It's known all over the world to be one way of actually getting out the emotions that you have and being able to cope with that situation, as it were. Positive talk is very important. How you speak to self is very important. It has a way in how you think about yourself, the emotions that come from within. So positive talk as well is a developing skill. Spending quality time with a partner or a family is an important aspect. I understand right now we've talked about domestic violence, but being able to spend quality time and talk over things can be a positive way of coping with stress. Seeking help. Even in work environments, we have what we call the employee assisted programs, the acronym being EAPs, are very important. I know Absa has one where you're able to seek help either through a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and getting help is very important. Doesn't mean that you're weak, but it means that you have actually recognized that there is a problem and you require help. Engaging in hobbies. One of the things to do with things like mental illnesses such as depression, such as anxiety, or schizophrenia, these illnesses tend to actually make people to have that social withdrawal, moving away from people, having symptoms, what we call like where you do not feel you have any pleasure in any pleasurable activity. So engaging in hobbies will help in coping. Being involved in community work, but not too much, to the extent that you do not have time for yourself. Remember, when you engage too much in work and not remember to have time for yourself is also a negative. Like, just look at the negative coping skills, things to do with addiction, being engaged in a lot of drinking too much, gambling, being involved in violence. These are negative coping skills. Isolating yourself, or what we call social withdrawal. Repressing those feelings or those emotions that you have, such that you do not want to remember the bad things that have happened, and not tackling them, as it were, is a negative coping skills, because you'll definitely blow it up once it gets out of hand. Self-harm and suicidal behavior is also a negative coping skill. Being a workaholic, so as to avoid dealing with circumstances. Again, this is a negative coping skill. Moving to the next slide. So health is a state of being, and whereas wellness is a state of living a healthy lifestyle. Remember that your wellness will definitely affect your health. So the choices that you make on a daily basis are what will either determine whether you are healthy or not. So wellness is a matter of choice. Choosing to overindulge like in things to do with alcohol or on certain addiction will definitely lead you to mental illnesses, things to do with drug-induced psychosis, addictions with either nicotine or other drugs. Therefore, your health depends on your wellness. Remember that there is a quote saying that it is not the load that breaks you, it is how you carry the load that breaks you.
Thank you, and you ended it off so amazingly. And I think just a quick follow-up question. You've mentioned some of the negative coping mechanisms. So if we are seeing this in some of our loved ones or our colleagues, how are we able to help them then, start adopting positive coping mechanisms?
Thank you so much, Mpilo, for your question. That's a very important question. Like I mentioned, in one of the positive coping mechanisms is to seek for help. Largely in our society, we have stigmatized even mental health practitioners such that we do not want to engage them. And this is one of the ways in being able to help one to change from a negative coping skill to a positive coping skill. Remember, when you seek help from a professional such as a psychologist or a psychiatrist, there are skills that they can impart to you, or coping skills that they can be enabled you to get to. Looking at your problem, as it were, it may seem to be insurmountable, but we'll break it down to smaller manageable pieces using strategies such as what we call CBT. It's a cognitive behavioral therapy. This is a psychological way of a psychotherapy of treating the patient. Again, if a patient or if the person is unwell, believe they may be having depression or anxiety, we may put them on medication to the extent that we lift them up from their depressive mood, and from there keep doing psychotherapy, like I mentioned on CBT, so that they can view their life or their challenges differently and handle differently. Remember what I said, it is not the load, but it's how you carry the load.
Yes, no, we'll definitely remember that. Thank you so much, Dr. Amadi, for your discussion. And before we move on to our second panelist, Boitumelo, we're just going to have a quick poll that we would like all of you to just take a few seconds to answer, which will really assist in Boitumelo's discussions. So as you can see, it's popped up on your screen. And the question, very simple question, is how often do you think one should self-care? Once a week? Once a month, so that being month end, every day, twice a month, or weekends only? All right. Thank you so much for that. And the questions, the results shared with us shortly. Okay, so we have 10% saying once a week, we have 0% saying once a month, 89% saying every day. That's very encouraging, and 0% saying twice a month, and 1% saying weekends only. Thank you so much for taking the time to answer it. We truly do appreciate it. And with that, we're going to move on swiftly to our next panelist, Boitumelo.
All right, good morning, everybody, once again. If I could just get my slides up. I think I just want to comment first on the poll. I think it just made my heart smile seeing that everyone, is in agreement with me, or most people are in agreement that self-care should be an everyday thing. Very, very much important, but I'll be unpacking that shortly once I just see the presentation. So if that could please come up for me. Thank you so much. All right, so I will be discussing self-care as we have, I said earlier on. And if I could just have the next slide so that I can just start off by defining what self-care is. Fortunately, I am quite well acquainted when it comes to self-care. Given my profession, we have to engage in self-care ever so often. All right. I think the first thing, just in terms of unpacking self-care, is that it is an activity that one does deliberately. And I think the operative word being deliberate. So we have to be intentional in terms of self-care. And why is that? Again, I think one of my favorite sayings is that we cannot pour from an empty cup. You cannot give what you don't have at the end of the day. Just to add on to also what the doctor earlier on said. And by the way, brilliant presentation, doctor, very, very much informative. And I think for me, from a mental health practitioner perspective in the South African context, it was very interesting to see, Kenya's stats around mental health and mental illness. So again, back to self-care, and I think it links quite nicely when it comes into, mental health or looking after ourselves from a holistic perspective. And again, just to unpack what self-care is, like I said initially, it has to be deliberate in order to take care of, one's mental, emotional, and physical health. So like I said, it's quite holistic. It helps us improve our overall mood, reduces anxiety, and especially because we are in the middle of a pandemic, as a world, not even just as a nation or as a continent. Yeah. Right. And what it also aids us with is that it helps us to enhance energy, to restore health, and also to reduce our stress levels. All right. And lastly, it is definitely self-initiated, meaning that depending on the relationship that you have with yourself, and I'm really hoping that most of us have good and healthy relationships with ourselves, it would definitely come from that space where we initiate having to look after ourselves. And again, referring back to the poll, this should be something that is done on a daily basis. You know, I know some people are like, but that is impossible. I'm a dad, I'm a mom, I'm someone's, you know, partner, I'm someone's parent and all of that. There's never enough time in the day. And I always say to people, we're very quick to pretty much prioritize everything else but ourselves. And I always say to people, we are our own tools. So at the end of the day, if you're not looking after the tool that is actually doing all the work, then what is the quality of our output at the end of the day? And that's why self-care is so important, is that we make sure that our cups or our jugs are very much full so that we're able to give of ourselves at the end of the day. All right, and then the areas that there's different areas of self-care, and as you can see up on the screen, we've got the physical part, which, you know, entails movement of the body, nutrition, which Amy will be talking to us about, you know, sleep, rest, physical touch, and sexual needs as well. And I think people always just fixate on particular parts when it comes to self-care and not really keeping in mind that we are holistic beings, you know, so it's not just about our brain or our emotions or our physical health, you know, it's pretty much encompassing everything else. Second bullet being psychological, you know, so learning new things, applying your mind, setting those good and healthy boundaries. And I know a lot of people struggle to set good and healthy boundaries. I think people assume that, you know, boundaries always have to be pretty much uncomfortable or negative. No, we need to have healthy boundaries in our personal lives as well as in our professional lives, you know. And I'm always encouraging, especially with parents during this time, to also teach their children good and healthy boundaries. And it definitely aids you when it comes to self-care, and it definitely also helps in terms of people not having as much guilt because you're used to putting in those good and healthy boundaries. All right, practicing mindfulness. And creativity as well. And when we speak about mindfulness, and I'm hoping again Amy might just unpack that a little bit, it's about being present, you know, it's about being mindful when you are engaging in different things. A nice example that I like giving people is that how often do we have meals, and as we're eating our meals, we're actually mindful about the eating process, so that you're actually tasting your food, you're actually chewing your food, you're swallowing it, and you're actually engaging in just that process. So just as an example, that would be one person being mindful while engaging with eating at the end of the day. Next one being emotional. All right, and that's enhancing emotional awareness, navigating your emotions, increasing empathy and compassion, compassion for self and other people, and managing our stress. You know, and again, when it comes to the emotional component, it also depends how present you are, and you know, emotional intelligence plays part and parcel of that, but also relationship with self. Do you acknowledge your own emotions, or do you just disregard your own emotions? So it becomes very difficult to apply that level of, you know, emotional awareness and empathy for self if we can't even acknowledge what emotional space we're in. And again, that can be influenced by different things, how we're brought up, you know, how we're socialized as well. And, you know, there's normally quite a big discrepancy in terms of how males and females are socialized as well. And I think that's how we also, it influences how we engage with our emotional self as we get older. But it's very much important to be able to acknowledge and connect with ourselves from an emotional perspective. Social being, you know, supportive groups and networks of relationships you can rely and depend on. So again, with the social component, it is that sense of community, it's that sense of support, which is very much important, not only because we are in the middle of a pandemic, but generally it's always good to know, you know, where your support structure pretty much lies. Financial, being responsible with your finances, having a conscious and honest relationship with money, very much important, because again, that also sets a precedent in terms of self-care. You know, people have money for everything else. You know, cars need to be paid, bond, you know, maintaining and sustaining businesses. But again, how much of that do you put aside for your own pretty much investment in that regard? And I know that some people, when they are anxious or they're stressed, they end up spending quite frivolously at the end of the day. So just being conscious and aware around those things, that's part and parcel of our self-care. On the spiritual pillar, and again, being spiritual doesn't necessarily mean that you're religious at the end of the day. So you don't have to be religious to be spiritual at the end of the day. And those form part and parcel of our beliefs and value systems that are important to us and guide us with regards to our behavior. So how we relate to ourselves, how do we relate with people around us, our environment, you know, so those are all part and parcel in terms of just connecting spiritually. And I think for a lot of people, the spiritual pillar plays a huge role, you know, like I said, because it's part and parcel of self-development, connecting with self, connecting with energies, connecting with your higher power, whatever it is that best works for you in that regard. All right, and then in terms of environmental, that's organized and clutter-free space, you know, monitoring our social media, minimizing waste. And again, with organized and cluttered-free space, look, I know some people function in organized chaos. And I'm like, look, if that works for you, that's fine. There's some people that also kind of speak of, you know, my space is always clean, but it's a little bit cluttered. And, you know, sometimes in psychology, we'll say that's a bit of a reflection of how you're feeling inside. So just to be aware of our environments and how organized or how clear, you know, your space is, your energies are very, very much important to kind of be cognizant of that, because our environment also fuels and aids, you know, our sense of well-being and looking after ourselves. Professional, so sharing your strengths, striving in your career, and just, you know, discovering your niche. And I think that's also part and parcel of self-care, because at the end of the day, you know, if you're doing what you love, it never feels like you're working a day in your life. And I can personally relate to that, because I love what I do, because I'm very much passionate in terms of what I do. It really just aids in terms of my mental health, my emotional health, my spiritual health, and my physical health at the end of the day. So keeping in mind that we need to also just focus on self-development. How do we aid ourselves and grow ourselves from a professional pretty much standpoint? And just moving on to my next slide, in terms of strategies, you know, certain things that we can put in place to help us self-care. Very, very much important. And please just take a mental note in that regard. Number one being establishing a routine for yourself. Look, and when we speak about routine, we're not necessarily saying that it has to be militant and it has to be super rigid. I always say chop and change until you find what works for you with regards to routine. But again, we are creatures of habit as human beings. So putting in those good and healthy routines is always very, very much beneficial when it comes to us. All right, make lists of daily tasks and activities that you'd like to achieve. Again, I always say to people, keep it realistic. You know, at the end of the day, if you put just huge amounts of expectations and you're not keeping it realistic, then you're almost setting yourself for failure. And at the end of the day, we're not trying to set people out for failure. So make that list of daily tasks and activities. And these are also nice strategies that you can do on an individual basis, but you can also do it from a family basis. You know, try and put these things in place when it comes to your children, your partners, and then at least it just creates that sense of self-care from, again, a family perspective and an individual perspective. And it makes it much easier for you to put those things in place when it comes to self-care, when everyone else is also self-caring during that time. Hydrate constantly. I always say to people, water is life. All right, so make sure that you hydrate. It's very much important for the body. Set physical and emotional boundaries and stick to them. It's very difficult to have to unlearn and relearn a lot of things. So I know that in the beginning, initially, it's very difficult for people to put boundaries in place. But once you do it, it becomes part and parcel of your lifestyle. And again, it aids us at the end of the day in terms of just putting those good and healthy boundaries. Like the doc said earlier on, journaling, very much important. You know, put pen to paper, and it helps in terms of just processing our thoughts, processing our emotions, and also helping us maybe just realize what's feeling a little bit heavy for us at this point in time, what needs to go, what needs to stay. So I always say journaling is amazing. For those that are not keen on putting pen to paper, I always say then, you know, record yourself in terms of just when you're reflecting at the end of the day or in the beginning of your day. So make it work for you. All right, engage in healthy social media and limit your engagement time on social media as well. Why? Because again, people I think take for granted that the things that we take in have a huge influence on us, you know. So if you're just constantly just taking in negative, you know, content that's on social media, content that leaves you feeling insecure, or making you just leaves you feeling a little bit drained, or all those type of things. Again, I always say be very, very cautious of who you follow in terms of social media, what it is that you're following, and make sure that whatever it is that it aids you at the end of the day. All right, breathing exercises every morning, which I'm super excited that Amy will probably be unpacking a little bit more of that. Very much important. I think we take breathing for granted. I think because it's such it's a habit. We've been breathing since we were born. We don't really realize how much we can get from that. But again, I won't unpack on that too much. As well as the next point as well, movement and stretching your body on a daily basis. You know, again, these are a lot of the holistic things that we can put in place, and I won't elaborate too much on that because I think Amy will definitely be touching on that. Next one being focusing on what is in your control and letting go of the rest. You know, I always say in life there's two types of problem. There's a type 1 problem, which is your problem, and there's a type 2 problem, which is someone else's problem. And that normally helps me when I'm in a bit of crisis, or it helps people in a bit of crisis to establish, is this my stuff or is this someone else's stuff? It also helps in terms of having to implement boundaries at the end of the day. You know, so establish, can I do anything about this? Am I in control here? If not, will stressing about it aid me at any point? You need to be asking yourself those type of things. All right, positive self-talk. So our internal dialogue plays such a pivotal role in terms of just how we engage with ourselves, how we engage with other people, how we look after ourselves at the end of the day. So we all speak to ourselves. I always say to people that it's a bit of a problem if you're having a conference in your head, then maybe you need to just, you know, pick up the phone and give someone a call, a professional a call, but we all speak to ourselves. You know, I think being aware of whether that is positive self-talk or negative self-talk is very important, because some people are not consciously aware that the internal dialogue is very negative, and that has a ripple effect in terms of our behavior and how we engage with work, with our families, with our friends. So again, look, we have tough days, and that's normal. We're all human. But again, when you are doing, you know, great stuff and you know, accomplished, even if it's a small milestone, give yourself that positive affirmation, you know, congratulate yourself when you've done, even if it's the most smallest of things at the end of the day. Positive self-talk is very much important. Next one being check up on and reach out to loved ones. I know it's difficult sometimes when we are in a bit of a funk, you know, to kind of be vulnerable and open up to people, but find that 1 or 2 people that you can open up to and that you can reach out to, especially if you're not in a good space. All right, take up a new hobby, explore all those different hidden talents that you may have, things that you've always wanted to try out. I always say to people, at least try it out once. At the end of the day, you'd be surprised what you can be, you know, what you are capable of doing. All right, filter in meditation and prayer time. Okay, very, very much important. Like I said, you don't prayer, if you are very much religious, you know, I always kind of associate that very closely to pretty much meditation, because, you know, at that point in time, you are engaging with your source of strength, you know, whether it be whatever the case may be. I'm not going to necessarily prompt anyone in that regard, but meditation is key, and it's absolutely beautiful. And like I said, I can't wait for Amy to unpack that a little bit for us. Again, it helps center us. It helps us kind of, you know, stay connected with oneself, stay connected with, you know, with your environment. I'm very much an energies person as well, so it helps you just realign and to reconnect. And again, a lot of people say, I don't know how to meditate. You know, when I'm meditating, there's 10,000 thoughts in my mind, and, you know, there's no silence. And I always say, you know what, practice makes perfect. And again, like I said, Amy will probably guide us a little bit in terms of just how to create that inner silence, because I know being in a chaotic world or chaotic environment, sometimes it's very difficult to have to connect with that silence at the end of the day. But meditation and prayer, I'll always say, you know what, let that be your go-to beginning of the day, at the end of the day, just to pretty much reconnect and realign with oneself. All right, very much important. And my last point is to factor in rest and downtime. All right, and you'll see with my last slide, and I'm happy for you to just change to the last slide, is that at the end of the day, we all need to make that time where we unplug and we reconnect with oneself. So almost everything, you know, will work again if you unplug it for a few minutes, and that includes us as human beings. And we normally see it with our devices, you know, when it gets stuck or it hangs or it lags or whatever the case is, we unplug for a couple of minutes and we plug it in again and it works. Same thing with us, is that on a daily basis, we need to create that 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, you know, where we just unplug and again, we connect with self, we refill our cups so that we don't pour from an empty cup, number one. And number two, the analogy that I love using is that there's a saucer and a teacup. All right, make sure that that cup is full to a point where it's overflowing. What's on the saucer is what you give everyone else, and what is in that cup is for you. All right, and I think that's where I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vutumula. That was just so insightful, and I believe we've learned so much. The question I do have is, what kind of best self-care practices can we do with family? Because in this time we are quarantined with our family members. So can you just give us a few tips on that?
Absolutely, more than happy to. So a few fun activities in terms of families. And look, I personally do it with my family when I am with them. So my parents, my nieces and nephews, is family yoga time. All right, even with the little toddlers, it is so much fun for them, you know. So again, just some nice yoga stretches. Find something that'll be fun and exciting and accessible for everyone. You know, my parents are quite elderly, so I try and just, you know, make sure that it's accommodating of everyone, you know. So that's the first one. Second one would definitely be downtime as a family, you know, where again there's always that downtime time, you know. So whether it be 5 o'clock after everyone's done with work, where we have 15 minutes of silence, everyone goes into their corner, into their spaces, and you know, there's no social media, so you're not sitting in your room on your phone, but you're literally having some quiet time. And I know sometimes with toddlers and little ones in the beginning, you know, because they're just so used to being overly stimulated, it might be a bit challenging, but as they get used to it, you'll see them just calm down during that time. And you know, you'll even get the little ones reminding you that, hey, isn't it downtime now, you know. So putting those type of things in place. And lastly, I think family time. So whether it's around the dinner table when you're having dinner, but let's sit and engage and debrief on the day. Ask your kids about how was their online classes, you know, how's their teachers doing, how are their schoolmates doing at the end of the day. Share about work and some of those, you know, stresses that you overcome during the day. But I think really just opening up that safe space where everyone gets to debrief and everyone gets an idea of where everyone else is at. So that also helps us in terms of a supporting perspective from a family basis. You know, how do we support each other? But also it creates that culture of sharing and that culture of, you know, pretty much saying that sometimes it's okay to not be okay. We are there for each other and we get to support each other. So those are the three that I'll definitely suggest just from a family perspective.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And I think they're so amazing because they're inclusive of all ages, because, you know, there's so many family dynamics that we have. So thank you so much. We truly do appreciate it. And with that, we're going to move on to you, Amy. And just to start us off, I'll ask you a question. We hear that there are so many different diets, foods to avoid, supplements to be able to take, so that we can be able to improve our mood. It can get a bit overwhelming. You know, we want to know, do any of them work? And which ones would you recommend if there are any?
Yeah, thanks, Impilo. So to answer the first part of your question, many do work. Eliminating or at least reducing foods that spike your insulin will balance your reactivity to external stimuli. So what you eat has a direct impact on the part of the brain that's stimulated and then your resulting mood. So for example, your limbic brain, which people are familiar with, the fight or flight reactions, feeds on sugars. But your neocortex, which is more responsible for higher order thinking, including conscious thought, feeds on fats. So if you can cut out sugars and eat healthy fats, then you can override that reactivity of your limbic brain and it'll give you more peace of mind. So to me, the really interesting connection between moods and nutrition is the gut-brain connection. And this has been talked about in more radical nutrition circles for a really long time, but it's only now starting to get attention in more mainstream research. And I'm personally intrigued in this because back in my 20s, I started really paying attention to my gut health and detoxifying, and I was able to completely get off antidepressants. And it wasn't until more recently when I learned that the gut produces 90% of your serotonin, which is a neurotransmitter that regulates mood, happiness, and anxiety. And so many antidepressants that people on the webinar may be familiar with, like Prozac and Zoloft, that are prescribed, act upon your serotonin levels. And so this gut-brain connection is really what I believe is the reason that I'm 25 years SSRI free, which is because the signals from your gut go directly up to your brain, like the nerves just go right up. So we know now that your gut has a direct channel to your insula, to your limbic system, to your prefrontal cortex, the amygdala, the hippocampus, and the cingulate cortex. And so these parts of your brain are responsible for things like self-awareness, emotions, morality, fear, memory, and motivation. So if you find that you eat for your gut health, you'll also be eating for your mental and emotional wellness too. So practically speaking, this would mean detoxifying your gut and giving it what it needs to be at its most optimal performance. So like Guatemala said, drink a lot of water. Don't drink coffee, it dehydrates you, it's not great. So lots of water, eat more vegetables, fewer grains, more fats, fewer animal proteins. And then if you're able, add in pre and probiotics. So prebiotics are dietary fibers that feed the good bacteria in your gut, and probiotics are the good bacteria that keep your digestive tract healthy.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's amazing. I think I, for one, didn't know many of those, facts that you have shared with us, and will definitely be implementing some of them. And so the second question, we know that exercise and meditation is good for us, but how will it help us get through the mood swings that we are having currently through lockdown?
Okay, thanks for the question. So exercise and meditation reduce stress, help you sleep better, increase positive emotions, enable you to focus, and reduce your reactivity to external stimuli. So one study at Harvard found that if you jog for 15 minutes a day or you walk for an hour a day, it can reduce your chance of becoming depressed by 26%. And then obviously the additional benefit of exercise is that it can help you fend off what's now, I guess, being called the quarantine 15, when people gain 15 pounds during quarantine. So for improving moods, especially if you don't have a lot of time, my top 3 exercises are jumping on a trampoline, twists, and headstands. So I'll tell you a little bit about the benefits of each of them. So the benefit of jumping, and okay, trampoline, I know you think ginormous, but you can get these small little rebounders. So my trampoline is about 1 meter in diameter. And the benefit of a trampoline is that it burns more calories and raises your heart rate more quickly than jogging. So it helps improve your mood in just a few jumps. So it's sort of like you get more impact with doing it for a less amount of time. And a lot of us, even though we're home all day, we seem to not have that much time, which is kind of counterintuitive, but how it's been going. It also increases your heart rate, which trains your body to move oxygen to your muscles more efficiently, which can reduce your chance of type 2 diabetes by over 50%, and also reduces your blood pressure, which then in turn lowers your risk of heart disease. Another benefit of jumping on a trampoline is that it utilizes all of your muscle groups. So you end up using your abdomen and your arms, and if you use those little hand weights, it'll even get, just tighten up this part of your arm so you can get those nice cuts back there. Jumping stimulates your lymphatic system, and that rids your body of toxins, bacteria, trapped protein, and dead cells. And it also then increases your immunity. So lymph contains white blood cells called lymphocytes, which fight infection. And I think right now everybody's paying attention to how can I increase my immunity. So the second thing that I really like are twists. Now, twists are really easy to integrate into your day because you can do them standing, lying down, and even sitting on your chair while you work, right? You can just kind of and spin the whole way around. So the benefits of twists include that it rotates your spine and those muscles, those muscles that go along the side of the spine, and that strengthens your back and preserves your range of motion. And especially as you age, that's something you want to be taking into account. It creates movement around your organs, and that improves blood circulation to and from your organs, which in turn also improves your digestion. It detoxifies your organs, and it also stimulates circulation and oxygenation, and that will reduce nervousness and stress. So one thing I want to point out is a lot of people, when they're going to stretch, they do forward bends, and forward bends stimulates your vagus nerve, which can actually increase anxiety. So if you're going to be doing forward bends and you're sort of in an anxious state, one, don't do them for too long, and 2, make sure that you have a pressure on your forehead, because that will reduce the anxiety that can come up from doing forward bends. So my third and favorite exercise to recommend for changing your moods are headstands. So headstands increase your focus and they calm your mind. They're incredible for strengthening your abdominal muscles, and they increase the blood flow, I can't speak, through the brain, and especially here the pineal and pituitary glands. So the pineal gland is responsible for turning serotonin into melatonin, and that will regulate your cortisol levels, that if they get unregulated, it'll cause mood disorders. So you see, especially women in menopause, the cortisol levels can be all over the place, and that's a part of where the moodiness can come from. And the pituitary gland is responsible for producing hormones that control body functions and also your well-being. So that's another benefit. Another thing about headstands is that they strengthen the lungs and they dislodge mucus that can collect in the lungs. And one thing, that we've been reading a lot about COVID is that the mucus fills up in the lungs and then people start to suffocate. And they recommend that people lie prone with their head lower than their bodies to kind of start moving that through. So that's something that'll happen naturally through headstands. And I can answer any questions about these later if people have, no problem. So to also then shift over to meditation, meditation has these amazing effects on our moods because they increase the gamma waves in your brain. Now, gamma waves are associated with peak concentration and a heightened sense of awareness, and they increase when the regions of your brain work in harmony. So they've done studies on monks' brains, and they showed that meditation activated larger areas of brain, particularly the prefrontal cortex, which is the section associated with positive emotions. Meditation has also been proven to reduce the inflammation associated with stress, and it reduces the cytokines, which are associated with depression. So fortunately for us, we don't have to spend decades in a monastery to experience some of these benefits. So if you'll kind of go with me, let's take a minute right now and do a breathing exercise so that you can see what I mean. Because just focusing on your breath, it's a type of meditation. And you can do this at any time to shift your mood. So I want you to think about one thing to keep in mind is that if you're feeling anxious and you want to calm yourself down, one of the most sort of immediate ways to do that is if you exhale for longer than your inhale. And this will work even with just 3 or 4 rounds of breathing. So let's give it a try, okay? All right, so sit up straight. And if you want to, close your eyes. Notice your breathing. And notice how the air passes in and out of your nostrils. Notice if you feel the air more on one or the other side. And notice where you feel your breath in your body. On your next inhale, inhale for a count of 1, 2, 3, and exhale 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And again, inhale 1, 2, 3, and exhale 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Inhaling 1, 2, 3, and exhaling 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Inhaling 1, 2, 3, and exhaling 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And now return to your normal breathing and notice any shifts in your awareness and notice how you feel. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. And I'm back.
Wow. That was amazing, Amy. For one, I just felt a lot of tension leave my body, which was very interesting, you know. And I think a thought that came in my mind was like, wow, this can actually help with like sleeping as well, just like easing you into, you know, that very like restful kind of sleep. So that was really so helpful. Thank you so much for that. And so the final question that I have is that so many people are dealing and facing challenges with anxiety due to the pandemic. And so could you guide us through maybe even a short meditation, or that could help to just like reduce this anxiety, just so that we ourselves can then be able to do it ourselves at home?
Yeah, of course. We can do we have time? I can do like a 3-minute meditation. We're okay on that, Mpilo?
Yeah, I think 3 minutes should be good.
Okay, so this is a short meditation, and this is specifically focused on anxiety, although it also works really well if you're trying to fall asleep, and you can use it on other members of your family. You can do it with them as well. And this meditation specifically resets your fight or flight system. And the fight or flight is the common name for the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, so HPA. And the HPA axis produces adrenal and cortisol, which are steroid hormones. And after a few months of age, humans lose the ability to reset this. So it's really good to know this exercise. So the way that we reset the HPA axis is by tuning the second chakra to the rhythm of the heart chakra. So if you could take the slide off the screen just for a moment, please. Okay. So our heart chakra is right here, just above your heart. So if everyone can take their left hand and put it on their heart, and then you'll take your right hand and you'll put it on your second chakra, which is about 2 inches below your belly button. Okay, so that'll be the placement. Okay, if you do it on someone else, they'll be lying down and you'll have your left hand under their heart and your right hand under their belly button, but we're going to be doing it on ourselves. So for now, just put your hands down. This one's the left. So just take your left hand and put it on your heart, and take your right hand and just leave it in your lap for a moment. Okay. So if you can do this either with your eyes open or closed, maybe just close your eyes and place your left hand on your heart. And if you can breathe slowly in through your nose, somebody's got and out through your mouth. Breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth. I'd like you to just start to feel your heartbeat. Become aware of the speed of your heartbeat and what your heart feels like in your chest. No judgment, just be aware of this feeling. Now I'd like you to imagine the heartbeat of Mother Earth. Imagine what the heartbeat of our planet feels like and its rhythm. And with a sense of that, imagine the heartbeat of Mother Earth tuning your heartbeat so that the two are beating in sync. Allowing your heartbeat to slow down and to meet the heartbeat of the Earth. Once you feel your heart connected to the heartbeat of the Earth, breathe there.
Now take your right hand and place it on your second chakra, just under your belly button. Be aware of this little beating in that chakra. And with your attention on your heart beating, allow your second chakra to slow down and match the rhythm of the heart chakra and the heartbeat of Mother Earth. As your second chakra slows down and your heart is beating at this pace in sync with the heartbeat of our planet, allow yourself to breathe. And when you're ready, you first remove your hand from your second chakra and then from your heart. And now you can open your eyes.
I'm sure I'm not the only one that's feeling rather rested and calm right now. Amy, are you trying to send us off to sleep? No, thank you so much. That was really, really, really good. And you know, with that, Amy, I think we will wrap it up there. Thank you for such an insightful discussion, and we'll come back when we have the Q&A question. And with that, we will move on to Caroline. And so, Caroline, just quick question to start us off. So from your personal perspective, how has your experience been during this period, especially with the view of mental health in consideration?
Thank you, Mpilo. And yes, I'm the girl that can't tell the left from right. I have to actually mentally think about that. I think it's a thing with, I don't know, upbringing or wiring. The mental health people will tell me what that's about, but I literally have to check every single time what's my left hand, what's my right hand, and then engage. But yeah, good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be here today. And in terms of the question that you've asked me, Mpilo, I think for me first is it's been a very interesting time. Like I said before, I've had to make various adjustments. I'm working from home, as we all are, as most of us are trying to, at least those that can. And then to a great extent, I've also had to make adjustments around my home space, because as I said, it's become a co-working space. I have 3 kids, one who's 25, who came back home just in time, just before the shutdown. And so she's working from home with me. So I've created a space where we are together. And then I have a high school student and a prep school student. So now I have the additional role of being a headmistress and basically running a small school, like I said. So it's been an interesting time in terms of, you know, from a mental perspective. There's been some upsides. I think for me, the first upside is just the work-life integration. I'm a strong believer in being able to live a full life, and I think the commutes and the long days away from home and getting home late after, you know, a long day's work and everything really used to take a toll on me, because it meant I had very little time with the kids. But now, given that they're, you know, I'm able to be with them, even in as much as it's a complex situation or a very, you know, versatile situation, I'm able to integrate my life. And so from that perspective, it's quite positive. It's positive also because the other thing that I've been doing is spending a lot of time with them, you know, doing different things, like some of the activities you were talking about, some of the speakers were talking about earlier. We do family walks, we're baking now, we make banana bread. I think everybody in the world makes banana bread as a result of this COVID, which is great. I've also gotten to know my kids better. So from that perspective, again, it's given me a lot of insight into my own family. So one has mild ADHD, requires some level of care, which we otherwise would not have noticed if I hadn't been there. The other one is an artist. She actually can draw very well. 25 years later, I'm only discovering now. And obviously, the third one is she's a bit more of a complex child. So with her, we're just deepening understanding. And so from that perspective, I'm noticing what I'm noticing. I've noticed, spent enough time on myself and also just, reflection and what have you. So positive gains from that perspective mentally. But also there's the other side, which is around burnout and exhaustion. So many long hours doing Teams calls that can really leave you feeling completely debilitated. And I've been asking myself, what is this about? And maybe one of the experts can share what it is about having calls on Teams or Zoom leaves one so exhausted, different from physical meetings. I think that would be something worth exploring. So overall, I think it's been a mixed bag, but largely grateful to be able to be at home, to work from home, to make my contribution, as part of the Absa family. And yeah, generally that's been my experience so far.
No, that's been great to hear. A lot of people, I think in the beginning of this time, we were struggling with having that work-family integration, because we're so used to there being a distinction between, okay, this is work time, this is family time. So my second question will be, Absa, a bank with core business is offering financial solutions to people, but during this period, they have come out in a big way to offer a lot of psychosocial, support to Kenyans. So I just want to know, is this something that as a bank was by default, or was it intended design?
Actually, it's by design. And maybe before I get into Absa proper, maybe let me just give a little bit of my personal experience. Like I said, my daughter came from the UK and she just made it in time before the borders closed, but she didn't make it in time for self-quarantine at home. So she had to go to a facility, one of the government mandated facilities, to quarantine. And for that, a number of things came to light for me. One was the fact that, these people are spending long periods of time in little rooms, basically doing very little. She was lucky because she had a bit of work. She could work because she was working from remotely, but a lot of her fellow people in quarantine didn't have the same experience. So there was a lot of a sense of, I guess, désolé. They were, purposeless, day in, day out, not really doing much. That's one. I think the loss of connection with family was also one that also got a lot of people quite anxious. On the other side as well, we as a family were also quite anxious around the fact that what are the protocols they're using in there, how are these people being cared for, etc., etc. So it was personally also, stressful for me. And so she had to leave a bit earlier because she had a core morbidity issue, which we discovered, and therefore managed to pull her out a bit earlier than the rest. And while we were there was lady, while I was collecting her, there was a lady that was actually, quite stressed out, and, she was running around and she was actually threatening to commit suicide. And they had to come, the Ministry of Health people had to actually come for her. And it made me realize that, there's, on the face of it, it's just, it looks like a medical issue, but what lies beneath is something that's quite, quite difficult to deal with. So personally, I work in the corporate relations department, along with my MD and our fellow EXCO members, got together and said, how can we support? Because again, businesses are built by people, they're operated by people, they're about serving people. So if people aren't in good shape, the whole thing doesn't really work, and we can't, flourish as a business as well. And we said, Absa seeks to, to act as a force for good in society. We are committed to going beyond our category in terms of doing something for the communities in which we operate. There is a real need in this area, and therefore, makes sense for us to participate in psychosocial support. So we partnered with Minette, who are our caregivers even internally, and extended this service to the rest of the wider public in order just to support them. So yes, it's not about financial services. It is more than financial services, because we're whole human beings, and as we've heard, you have to take care of the whole person, and consequently the whole business, the whole community, the whole society, for it to actually for real gains to be made.
Yes, no, that's really amazing to hear. And then I think the last question would be, what kind of support have you guys been giving to Kenyans? Are there specific programs that are running to this effect?
Yes, thank you for that. And I think I'll start. It's twofold. The kind of support that we've been giving is one. Let's start by saying charity begins at home. So of course, I think it's Vitamelo, and actually everybody else has been saying you can't give what you don't have. So we have to take care of ourselves. So as Absa colleagues, especially, we initially set out to see how we can best support them. The initial actions were around, washing of hands, sanitizing, and all that, social distancing, asking people to go and work from home, etc. And that worked well, because that was the initial reaction. It was a necessary reaction, given that we were now dealing with, a virus that we didn't understand very well. But we also understood that over and above that, as a result of these actions that we're taking, so for example, the fact that people no longer come to work, they're working from home, those who can, there's other things that are showing up, which is a sense of helplessness, a sense of isolation, a sense of loss of connection and community. And so again, it became clear to us that we need to ensure that we're taking care of our colleagues. And again, with the partner that we mentioned, Minette, we reached out to our colleagues. I was reached out to as well. So it was it's a company-wide effort, where essentially, it was a check-in call to see if, how you're doing, how you're feeling, do you need any support, etc., etc. So that's one of the key things that we did from an internal perspective, to ensure that people's wellness, mental wellness and mental health was being taken care of. Beyond that, we've also now instituted various things around this space, which is, for example, providing lots of information. I think one of the things that we've realized is the helplessness and lack of control comes as a result of not knowing what this is. So the more information that you can give and provide to colleagues, the better equipped they are. So that this way you give them some sense of control, some sense of knowledge, and give them some agency in terms of how to deal, how to process, how to work out all these things that they're facing. So again, we've very concerted effort towards providing good information from proper valid sources. So because of course there's all sorts of rumors and things that are flying around every day, but Ministry of Health, World Health Organization, and reputable doctors essentially giving information. As I said, we carried out the support. We've also been working hard on softer points around enabling people during this time as they work remotely. So, for example, we have something we're calling camera on sessions, where at least once a week a meeting is held between team members, with cameras on, so you can actually see each other. So it's not always this remote conversations in the background, or this voice that you can't make a connection to. You can't see the facial expression, which I think creates a lot of dissonance, which is a word I've heard being used. So camera on sessions are also in one way in which we're saying colleagues can support each other internally during this time. We've also got a check-in, a nice little device that we're using, where we have, I think, a total of 7 different colors for your heart, ranging from green, which would say I'm doing great, all the way to I think it's gray, to red, where it says I'm having a hard time. So there's different levels of the heart space, and that again, just sharing your heart color will cause for your fellow colleagues, or then if you need to actually reach out to a counselor, you can reach out to a counselor, but it basically allows for colleagues to check in. And I think largely saying, okay, you know, working from home means that people can go on forever and ever. There's no routine. You know, you wake up in the morning, you start meetings at 8, you finish meetings at 9, because we just on and on and on. People can book time in your calendar and what have you. But we've come back and said, you know, that will end up causing for a real sense of burnout. So how do you ensure that you establish a routine as you would if you were in the office? So lunch breaks, you know, recognizing that 1 hour in the day is lunch, and you will not schedule meetings for that time. Giving proper notice for meetings, you know, 24 hours or maybe even more than that, especially if you need to prepare. You know, just using the proper work protocols and etiquette that you would use if you were working physically together, and in that way support each other in ensuring that the burnout doesn't happen and that people can get downtime, recharge, etc. So that's internally. It's quite a bit of effort happening internally, really centered around that, just mindfulness, being mindful of other people's time, being mindful of your own time, and also, you know, being generous and ensuring that there's connection, and being totally intentional in the way in which you are showing up during the day or during the work week. So that's internally. Externally, if I may, we, as I said, partnered with Minette, and this essentially was around providing a 24/7 call helpline, care line, where you can call in. This service was opened up to people in isolation, people in quarantine, health workers, families of people in those situations, and you know, and basically that fraternity, because we felt that that is where the greatest need was, especially you know, initially. Obviously, we will seek to expand that going forward. I think it's important to just point out, and you know, some of the things we've learned as a result of this, the work that we've been doing with Minette. And it's interesting that I think Dr. Hamadi said that men, you know, don't tend to talk much, and maybe possibly one of the ways in which we can help them is opening up lines such as this, because out of all the calls we got a total of 3,326 calls during that time. 65.2% of those were from men. So it's clear that there's a need, but they probably need to be talking to somebody that isn't necessarily a family member or a loved one, because more often than not, I suppose men need to be the ones, you know, providing direction. So where do they go to when they need direction? So I think there's a need there around you know, that care line, and that we were able to support. Some of the issues that came up are the issues that we've talked about: mental health, loss of income, insomnia, need for food, you know, simple things as that. I mean, as basic a need as that I don't have food and I'm not sure now what to do. Harassment by police, marital issues. And so in this, through this partnership, we've been able to actually now garner what the pertinent issues are. Those issues are both external, internal, and are able now to formulate programs and support lines for people who we are supporting. And that's a partnership, like I said, we will be looking to renew. We're actually in the process of renewing and widening, and possibly working with the Ministry of Health in the coming days to see how we can scale it up, because it is true, you know, mental health is not something that's well understood in this country, and people just get, you know, have the sense of, you know, snap out of it, get on with it, you know, no real need to be spending too much time in your head or being sorry for yourself. There's real problems like food, or like you know, education, or like just money, rent. So what's this thing about you being depressed, which is kind of unfortunate. I think the other one is just around the stay active. We saw that on the video that we shared. We had great plans when we launched. We were going to do all sorts of things. We were partnering and are still partnering with Eliud Kipchoge to run what we call the Torch of Possibilities. We had partnered with a whole host of athletes, elite athletes, to basically fundraise for ablution blocks for schools. Obviously, with the restrictions on events and movement, that whole effort stopped. But what we've done is actually said, okay, how can we reorganize ourselves to ensure that, to see how we can support the community. And so what you've seen there with Sheila Mwaniga and Shiv influencers is part of that. Initially, they were going to be training people to run. Now they're training people to stay home and stay active, which is essential. We are now we're rolling out another program with Chiki Kuruka, a dance thing, again, to help people stay home, stay active, and keep them engaged. And then we'll extend that partnership with the elite athletes and Elliot to basically support people in this time in the spaces that they are in to stay home and stay active, because as we've heard, your physical well-being is a crucial aspect of your health and your mental health in this time. So I think that would be largely what I say Absa is doing in terms of supporting both externally, internally. And I think for the SMEs that we are, hosting today, for us is to say, how can we share what we are doing and see how we can learn from each other. Some of the points I've raised here are quite straightforward in terms of they're not high level, they're not high investment items. So check-ins, camera on, heart color check-ins are not high investment things. So you can actually just do that quite simply. If you think about the other way in which we can support you is also to provide insurance. I think insurance is becoming increasingly important because we know that this is going to be on with us for a while. So we are here as Absa also to support you in terms of providing solutions for different types of covers, and in that way offer support beyond the support that we've been giving around loan relief and other moratoriums. This can be something that we could also discuss and see how we could help SMEs. Yeah, so I think with that, there's lots that can be said, and a lot has been said, and I'm sure other questions will come up. Like I said, our relationship managers, we've heard from our business banking director, we'll hear from our head of SME as well a bit later. They're all available, our details are available, and we can definitely talk to each other and see how we can put a plan together to support you in this time. I think in closing, for me, it's really just a question of saying, I'm alive to the fact that we're going to be living in a co-COVID world. I think there was pre-COVID, there is COVID, and now we talk about a post-COVID, but maybe post-COVID may not necessarily just be post as if it was all over and done with. There will be a season where we have to live with this, masks, social distancing, etc. So the question for us is, how do we ensure that, based on all the things we've heard today, we keep our heads and minds and bodies in good shape to cope with what is going to be a fairly long journey, or what has been a fairly long journey, and has no clear end in sight. So let's work together in webinars such as this and in different other forums to really build capacity and learn from each other.
Yeah, no. Thank you so much for that. I think it's so nice to hear that as a business, you guys are also thinking long term, because as you have just so perfectly expressed, this is a situation and a reality that's going to be with us for some time. So we do need to cater that when we are making our plans. And so with that, we will be moving now to our Q&A session. To all the attendees, I do ask that you guys give us an additional 10 minutes. We are running a bit late, but we want to ensure that we do ask our lovely panelists all the questions that you have shared with us. And so the first question, I'll really start it with Dr. Madi, and it goes as this: how can we get the mental wellness message across to children?
Oh, thank you so much. Well, getting the mental wellness message to children will just require us to, first of all, simplify it, in the sense that we get to explain to them what it means to be mentally healthy, and what are the choices that we need to make daily for mental wellness. Like I said earlier, that your mental wellness are the choices that you make on a daily basis and will have an impact on your mental health. We have it now, realize that our children are also at home. They're not in school, so spending much time classes through online, playing a lot of games online, and basically just being on screen for a very long period. Remember, these are choices that they have to be probably well trained in spending a bit less time in front of screens, because understand, spending too much time on the screen as well has a mental impact, because this now what I'm saying, that the choices that we make on a daily basis on our mental wellness that will impact on our mental health. again, being heavily involved in their lives, in the sense that in the things that they watch. We have had instances where children have gone to the extent of committing suicide because of games that they have been watching or been playing online. So passing that across, that indeed there are certain things that you may not want them to be involved in that will have an impact on their mental wellness and therefore on their mental health. So just simplifying it to the nitty-gritties or the things that they involve themselves in on a day-to-day is the best way to actually pass the message across to our children.
Oh,
thank you.
No, thank you. That's great. And then we'll move on to Boitumelo, and the question is, what are some of the indicators that can point to the fact that somebody's in the wrong direction when it comes to wellness and self-care?
Look, I think I'm going to link that quite nicely to mental health as well, because normally our body tells us when we're not okay. It just depends whether we're in tune or not in tune with ourselves at the end of the day. So things like sleeping patterns is normally one of the first things to kind of start disappearing. So insomnia or hyperinsomnia, so either sleeping way too much or just struggling to sleep. Things such as loss of appetite or an increase in appetite. And I know the fridge has been almost everyone's best friend during this lockdown. So some people end up stress eating or eating from anxiety. And again, not really being aware of that. Only once, things stop fitting very comfortably, then they start noticing that, you know what, I haven't been eating healthy, or I've been eating quite a lot, or I haven't been eating at all. So yeah, sleep, eating patterns, mood swings as well. And look, it's normal and okay to have those tough days. You're not going to be, walking on sunshine every single day. You'll have those days where you're feeling a little bit low and a little bit sad, and that's normal. I want to normalize that. I think the key thing to just be cognizant of is the persistence. Once it's behavior that is just persistent for about 2 weeks or more consistently, then I definitely say that, you need to seek some professional help in that regard. Irritability, anxiety, and fear, again, to a certain extent, because we are in the middle of a pandemic, that's very much normal for us to be slightly, anxious. I mean, it's a new norm, it's a new world that we're pretty much functioning in. But once it gets to a point where it's debilitating and you're not able to function in a very healthy way, that's when then you need to seek professional help. And like I said, we do have those tough days, and we need to allow for that, because maybe you need to plug out. Maybe you need to be self-caring a little bit more, but once it's consistent and you see that for about 2 weeks or more, you've noticed that your child is behaving that way, or you are, or someone gives you feedback that this has been a bit consistent, then you do definitely need to seek some professional help.
Mm-hmm. No, that's so insightful, especially on the issue of consistency if the issue is persisting. And then, Amy, we'll move on to you. There's a question here. How do we balance our energy levels during the meditative state? Could you give an overview about chakras?
Nice.
Ooh, those are big questions. So I think balance, so the energy, when you go into a state of meditation, whether that's a simple breathing, which obviously is not simple, but it's relatively feasible to do, or a deeper meditation, your energy will shift in your body, like you may have felt earlier today. And so that's it's not something that you control. And I think that's a really important thing about meditation, and probably also just getting through this time that we're in, is allowing ourselves to be in the moment, to feel what it feels like to breathe, to be in our bodies, and not be focusing on controlling what's outside of us. I don't remember, someone else said this during the panel, but it's really about the things that are yours and the things that are someone else's. It was Boitumelo. And so breathing is something that's yours. And just by focusing on that and bringing your attention to what that feels like, your energies will naturally shift. In terms of the chakras, that's like a really, really long, that would take a while. So, I mean, we can just simply, let's say that there are 7 energy centers in your body. And each of those energy centers are connected with different emotions and different organ systems. And so you want to be able to bring your attention to them. I think the easiest way would you, if you just Google the chakras online, you'll get many, many images. They start, and they're also associated with colors. So you start at your root chakra, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. So maybe a way to wrap up this question would be, one thing that you can do is you can imagine either each of those chakras in order or just one of them spinning in that color. And that's also a nice way to bring your attention and to bring healing to that chakra.
Wow, that's really great. Thank you so much, Amy. And then we'll move to Caroline. Someone here is asking, how do you manage finances during this pandemic, especially if you have to cut pays and the business that you are doing on the side is not making anything meaningful?
Wow, okay. I think that's a financial expert's question, and I suppose if I work in a bank, I should be one. But I think well, there's a whole host of things that one needs to do. I mean, I think budgeting must be the first thing that, you know, a relook at your budgets. I think one must now critically look at what's in scope, what's out of scope, you know, what can we do with that? What can we, you know, postpone? What can we reorganize in terms of redirecting funding from one area to another? Obviously, things like capital expenditure, investment should be very carefully considered, because you're not in the position right now to be putting away money that is idle. You want to actually be able to maintain some cash flow and working capital or that sort of thing. So if there was any capital investment that one was looking at, that needs to be possibly put on hold or reconsidered. And any investment, major investment, especially that is patient, needs also to be reconsidered. So there's a budgeting piece, there's a reconsideration around capital expenditure and investment. There is the reorganization and, you know, working with our experts. One of the things that we're doing, and I think some of the courses, I mean, some of the sessions that we've held have actually gone into detail around this. I know we did a particular webinar which should be available in online around, you know, working capital management. There was tips there that would, you know, give you a substantive idea as to how to go about that. You know, what programs or what, you know, software you can use in terms of just simple software that helps you reorganize yourself. So I think an investment in the information that's available online and through our partners, I mean, the partnership that we've got with the Grasha Michelle Trust, as well as the experts that we have here, support you in that way. But I think it's all about creativity. I think one of the things that we are being asked to do with COVID is essentially become very creative and reimagine almost everything. So where you didn't need an office space, you know, maybe just pull away from that and now work from home, because that's possible. Investment in tools that enable you to do that. And that whole reorganization of your business in a way that allows it to breathe as you talk to the financial experts who, you know, we have within the bank, you know, on an ongoing basis. I mean, business by business will have different issues, and we're happy to talk to you and see how we can support you.
No, thank you for that. I think it's great to know that the participants can reach out, you know, to follow up with that question. And so we're going into our second round of questions, and with the answering, could we please just limit it to 2 minutes, because we've got time is really not on our side. So again, we'll go back to Dr. Madi and follow the same order. The question here states, can you expound on people affected by depression in terms of age groups?
Well, thank you so much for that question. Age groups really don't have a large bearing on depression, as it were, because we still have children who are affected by depression. That is, it's a mood disorder, and well, age by and large will not have a very significant bearing on it. other than that, we would see that largely it's women who are mostly affected by major depression disorders, much more than the men. And there are various forms of it, and well, it's manageable, and based on the environment with where you are and the extent of the depression, some would actually require just to be on treatment. If it's a mild form of depression, psychotherapy will just do. It's an extreme, a major depressive disorder, you might actually be needed to be on medication for quite some time. And yes, depending on the cycle, probably of either getting too low, the other forms of treatment that can actually be done, depending on the circumstances. If there are people, for example, we have the other depression types where it comes about after delivery. So management is basically dependent on its presentation. By and large, we can't say that age has an impact on it, but all ranges of people in age can be affected by depression.
No, all right, thank you. And then we'll move on to Boitumelo, and the question here is, are there any wellness challenges that existed before COVID-19 that we are still likely to experience post-COVID-19?
Sure. Well, I can't look into the future and post COVID-19, but look, I can imagine. I think a lot of them, self-care, kind of mental health, mental illness related issues that we're experiencing now, I honestly feel, especially from a clinical perspective, that they're more exacerbated because we are in the middle of a pandemic. And, I loved what was said earlier on in saying that, it seems like from a continent perspective, there's a huge shift in terms of just focusing on mental health and wellness at the end of the day. And I really feel like, yes, us being in the middle of a pandemic has definitely, highlighted the importance of it. And I feel like a lot of these, struggles and some of the challenges that we're facing from a wellness perspective during this pandemic already existed. It's just that right now people are in confined spaces. People are pretty much having to face and tackle it at this point in time, and that's why it's seeming probably much more prevalent. But these have been issues that are existing, and honestly, I'm hoping, and I'm speaking it into life, that after this pandemic as well, again, it's raised that much level of awareness and the importance of us having to look after ourselves from a holistic perspective, because I think a lot of things are very external, they're very kind of tangible and financially based. So I'm really hoping that post-COVID, we will be probably dealing with a lot of issues, but I'm hoping that we'll be much more proactive than reactive as a continent, as a country, as a nation at the end of the day. So I do foresee that a lot of people will be realizing how many unresolved traumas they have, how many unhealthy lifestyles that they may be having, how disconnected they've been to self and the people around them. And I'm hoping that obviously we're very much well prepared to aid and to assist people in that regard. So I think there'll definitely be a much huger level of awareness around mental health and awareness as a whole.
Definitely. So true. And thank you for that. So Amy, now we move on to your second question. And the participant here is asking, could you enlighten us on the pranayama alkaline diet and the benefit of intermittent fasting?
Wow.
So alkaline diets are based on the concept that if your body is acidic, that's where disease grows, and that alkalinity allows your body to be naturally more clean. Intermittent fasting gives everything a rest. So and there's a lot of specific details around intermittent fasting based on your body weight and your exercise and stuff like that. But basically, it just enables everything to rest and for your digestive system to really start to like clean out and slow down, and then you build it up again. I think one of the things about intermittent fasting that's really important to keep in mind is, what do you eat first? So after, let's say you do a 16-hour fast, if you start with eggs and sausages and toast and coffee, that's going to shock your system. So if you're going to do an intermittent fast, you want to start with something that's called stomach layering. So you might want to start with some lemon water and then maybe some cucumbers, which will help build up your enzymes and strengthen your digestive tract, and then go to fruits, and then maybe go to like a nice salad. So you really want to think about not just, oh, I made it all these hours, but what are you going to do afterwards? And I think that's something that could get a lot more attention.
Right. No, that's good to hear. And for Caroline, the final question will be, does the bank partner with its clients to deliver the wellness message to the public, especially on its Africanicity campaign? How can one work towards this partnership?
If I understood the question was, how can one reach out to us and essentially become a partner in providing these services? Is that the question?
Yeah, so in helping spread awareness on the message of, in helping to spread the message on wellness to the public. So how can one partner with the bank to be able to do this if it is something that's possible?
Okay, definitely. So, I mean, one can just reach out to me, to my department, to myself directly. I think all my information will be available after this, and basically share what proposal they have. Like I've said, we are very committed to ensuring that we keep this conversation going and that we keep these activities going. So if there is new news and a new way in which we can do it, we are absolutely open to it. So just reach out to us and we'll take it from there.
Oh no, that's really exciting news to hear. And with that, our question and answer session has come to an end. Thank you so much to the audience that did submit some questions, and to our panelists who really just were so amazing in answering them all. So we are about to close, and just from my side, just want to express a great deal of gratitude for being able to host this amazing session that we had here today. And with that, we will move on to Susan Sitima. She is the head of the SME banking at Absa, and she will be doing our closing for us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm trying to get your name, Mpilo. Sorry.
Yeah.
For a great moderation of the session. It's been really insightful, I think packed with notes if you were writing. But the good thing is we're going to send the video to you, so you'll be able to play it over and over again. I really liked the meditation exercises for breathing, the anxiety exercise, some new things to learn out there today that has been very, very useful. We thank our speakers, starting with Boitumelo, Dr. Amandi, Amy, and our very own Caroline Dongo, who's shared some really great insights from herself and her experience. So it's been a really great session, and I thank each of you for being able to participate. I also want to thank a group of people that I've not thanked before. That's the Absa team. The SME team and the marketing team have really done a fantastic job in making sure that every other week, we deliver consistent messages to our business customers, just resonating with them during this period about what they can do to survive. Also, our partners, Grasa Machel Trust, that have actually made sure that every week we really go through quite a bit thinking, what do we bring to you? And thank you for your feedback that we've received on the next sessions, what we need to do. I ask that you use the Business Club email address that we sent you through the flyer to be able to reach out to us, even for the proposals that you would have around how else can we do things better together. We'll be very, very welcome to hear that from you. What next? Dr. Mandi will be taking a session on mentorship through this lesson next week on Tuesday at 11 a.m. We will share with you the details for logging in for that session. Be sure to join us if you want to probably go a little bit deeper about how you can create these routines for yourself and what you need to do. Maybe if you're dealing with certain employees in your organization and you're trying to figure out what can I do more. Please join us for that session. We'll be able to go through that. We continue to have our sessions on the social media pages. If you go to YouTube, you'll find small clips of what we've been doing through these sessions, and you'll be sure to just get enlightened on topics where I find sometimes we still ask for, especially the topics about getting your business online. I still have SMEs asking us for that, but be sure to get to our social media pages. We are using the hashtag Keep Growing, and you can find us there and be able to get a lot more information about what we've been doing during this period. Our next webinar will be on the 11th, sorry, let me just get that date right. So it will be on the 18th of August. We will be delving on the topic of emotional intelligence, just delving deeper into how, as a leader, what attributes can you acquire that your employees can leverage on to draw the best out of you and your inner strength and confidence, just keeping in tune with looking at the softer side of yourself as a business owner. I think there was a very nice thing that Caroline said earlier around businesses are run by people and people operate them. And therefore, you really must know how do you take care of yourself to be able to give out more. So in that respect, be sure to join us for that session that will be coming to you in another 1 week. Finally, I'd really want to encourage any of the audience that's currently not our customers to join us. We have an exciting account that we've launched during this season. It's called the Absa One Be Assured account. Be sure to join us. You can ask for more information, but we'll also send information to yourselves. If you registered for this session, we'll be able to give you more information. One of the things we're offering with that account is a free SME online toolkit to help you package yourself better, and we'll give you more information around that. So with that, I really want to thank you all for joining us and pray that you continue to keep safe, continue to observe the protocols given by the government for protecting yourself and your loved ones. And thank you so much, and God bless.